The continent of Africa has been inhabited by humans for the past 300,000 years, and yet its history seems to be the least known. Although schools briefly mention Mesopotamia and discuss the impacts of the slave trade, Africa's true impact on the world has often been overlooked. In between its thousands of years of existence, the continent of Africa has produced inspiring young women, impacted major world events, and experienced horrors that are simply just not talked about enough. During my time making this documentary, I interviewed 3 teachers, all with different perspectives, but one thing was clear. We do not learn about Africa enough.
During your time as a social studies teacher, how much African history did you teach / was in the curriculum?
Not a ton.
Students will be the country of Africa, and that's embarrassing because Africa is a continent, right? So the fact that they don't even realize there are countries within Africa is so disheartening and sad.
Just in general, most history teachers didn't spend a lot of time learning about African history in their own classes in high school.
But why is African history so undervalued in education, and what important lessons are we missing out on? To answer these questions, let's start in ancient Egypt, where we learn about one of Africa's most interesting women, Arsinoe IV. It's 51 BC in Alexandria, Egypt. Cleopatra has just secured her throne by marrying her brother, Ptolemy. But her 11-year-old sister, Arsinoe, is extremely jealous of Cleopatra because she wants the throne for herself. At the same time, Julius Caesar is expanding his Roman influence throughout the Mediterranean. Cleopatra sees what Caesar is doing and is like, hey, if I become friends with Caesar, then my spot in the throne will be completely secure because no one is gonna mess with Julius Caesar. But neither Arsinoe or Ptolemy like this alliance at all. They both view Caesar as a threat, and Arsinoe wants the throne for herself. So they decide to banish Cleopatra from her throne, and now it's Ptolemy and Arsinoe who are co-ruling Egypt. A couple years later, in the year 48 BC, Caesar decides to go visit Alexandria, and Cleopatra is still desperate for this alliance because she still wants her throne. So, in the middle of the night, one night, she sneaks into Caesar's living quarters, and they have a little dance party. They do the Devil's Tango together, and Cleopatra rocks Caesar's world so hard that he decides to form an alliance with her. Following Cleopatra's wishes, Caesar invades Alexandria and tries to capture Arsinoe in the royal palace. But Arsinoe narrowly escapes and rallies the Egyptian army to her cause. She returns with the force and launches an assault on Alexandria, storming the royal palace. The battle escalates and Caesar realizes that he has to make a run for it. So he travels to the lighthouse of Alexandria, but there he gets cornered by Arsinoe and the Egyptian army. Caesar, realizing defeat, strips out of his armor and his iconic purple cloak and jumps into the water below him. Arsinoe then takes his cloak and waves it for everyone in Alexandria to see. At just 11 years old, Arsinoe had outmaneuvered Julius Caesar, one of the most powerful men of all time. Arsinoe's story proves that ancient African history can be interesting and fun, and it's so much more than just Mesopotamia or the impacts of the Nile River. Her stunt also shows that women have always been strong, strategic, and important, even if textbooks don't always show that. In addition to having powerful women, Africa has also made a significant mark on the world stage, prominently during World War II.
Do you have a favorite part of African history or something that you think is most important to teach?
I think the part that I find most interesting that no one teaches about is the role of Africa in World War II. Just how important its role. It was the foundation of the Allies' basically recovery.
One of the most significant events during World War II was D-Day, the massive Allied invasion of Normandy, France in June 1944, which marked the start of the end of World War II. But what a lot of people don't realize is that D-Day would never have been possible without the events that happened in North Africa just a couple years prior. Before the Allied invasion, North Africa was controlled by Fascist Italy and Nazi Germany, either directly or through puppet governments like Vichy France. To gain a foothold, the US and its allies launched Operation Torch in November 1942. With the help of African troops and French colonial soldiers, the Allies pushed through North Africa, and by May 1943, they had gained full control of the region. From there, the Allies turned their attention to mainland Europe, beginning with the invasion of Italy in July and September of 1943. Italy surrendered later that year, and the Allies began pushing northward. In an email from Mr. Tyree, he states, "Everyone talks about D-Day, but generally ignore the fact that it was only possible because the Allies were attacking Europe from both fronts." One of the most significant events to occur in the last 30 years took place in the small country of Rwanda. The Rwandan genocide began in April 1994 and lasted for 100 days. Almost 1 million people lost their lives, resulting in a staggering death rate of around 10,000 people per day. The genocide was fueled by deep-seated racial divisions that had originated 80 years prior. In 1916, Belgium colonized Rwanda and introduced their pseudo-scientific beliefs regarding eugenics to the Rwandan population. They measured features such as noses and skull shapes and developed pigmentation charts. After collecting this data, they divided Rwandans into 3 groups and required them to carry identification cards. Hutus made up 84% of the population, Tutsis accounted for 14%, and Twas represented 1%. The Tutsis received preferential treatment, including access to cattle, education, respect, and positions of power, merely because they were considered more European than the other groups. Conversely, the Hutus were labeled as dirty, stupid, lazy, and childish, while the Twas were largely ignored. Eventually, Belgium withdrew from Rwanda entirely in the 1960s, but their influence lingered. By the 1990s, a fascist Hutu political movement had emerged, spreading horrific propaganda against the Tutsis. They referred to the Tutsis as cockroaches and claimed they did not have a right to live in Rwanda. The Hutus accused the Tutsis of using their cunning and charm to exploit and defile women, and blamed Tutsi wealth for Hutu poverty. They stated that killing Tutsis was a necessary act of self-defense because they were considered subhuman. Since the end of World War II, we have always heard the quotes, "never again," or "never forget." But the thing is, it did happen again. Very recently, actually, just 30 years ago. And there are no efforts being made to learn about it. That needs to change.
I think it's really important, and I think it makes us better people to have learned and read about the entire world, and we're more accepting, more appreciative of what we have, more giving to people who are in need. I just think it's really important.
Africa is gigantic, even if the Mercator projection doesn't show it properly.
Reference, okay.
And it's also diverse, ethnically, linguistically, culturally, historically. So it's as important as teaching about anywhere else in the world.
It's almost like dominoes. So one event, makes the other event happen, and so on and so forth. And so once you find out where you are, well, you start going back on the dominoes. And for me, a lot of that was European history. So, and that eventually touches on Northern Africa.
And the thing we must remember is that learning about African history doesn't take away from learning about other forms of history. Of course, it's essential to learn about American and European history. Those are vital in understanding the world and especially how we live today. But that importance doesn't take away from Africa's importance either. African history is history worth knowing. Thank you.